Welcome to South Dakota FSA's ARC PLC webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Gail Gullickson, and I am the State Outreach Coordinator for South Dakota FSA. Our program specialist will spend the next 45 minutes to the hour going over what you need to know about ARC PLC program and answering your questions. Because you are in a listen-only mode, you will see there's a chat box on your screen where you can type in your questions for us. We will try to answer as many as we can within the hour today, but please know that we will compile the entire Q&A and email that out to all participants, along with a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation and the link to the recording of this webinar. That will all come in one email from me in the next few days. There is a call-in number on your screen as well if you would like to use audio instead of watching through your electronic device. If you're having any issues with that, you can feel free to just call in and listen. So thanks again for joining us today, and let's get right into the program information. We've got Teresa Holdley with us. She is the FSA Program Director, as well as Shelley Binger, FSA State ARC PLC Program Specialist. I'll turn it over to Shelley to get us going.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank you for joining us today to discuss the 2021 ARC PLC program election and enrollment process. I also want to thank our outreach coordinator, Gail Gullickson, for setting this webinar up for us. As Gail said, my name is Shelley Binger, and I have been a state program specialist for the ARC PLC program since 2014. ARC PLC began with the 2014 Farm Bill, and with some changes has continued with the 2018 Farm Bill. I'm going to take you through our presentation today and talk about the process of election and enrollment for 2021, and also give you a brief overview of each ARC or PLC program. So ARC PLC is the main commodity crop safety net program for FSA. It was implemented as part of the 2018 Farm Bill, and it runs from 2019 to 2023. We are currently in the annual election and enrollment sign-up period for crop year 2021. Producers will have the option to make new elections for crop years 2022 and 2023 at a later time. It's very important that producers realize the deadline for election and enrollment is March 15th, 2021. That date's going to be here very soon. So we want to encourage you to call your FSA office sooner rather than later so that you can beat this deadline and be sure that your farms are timely elected and enrolled to make them eligible for the 2021 program year. There's no policy for FSA to accept late filed elections, and there will be no extension of this deadline of March 15th. So ARC County or PLC may be elected on a crop-by-crop basis on the farm. So if your farm has wheat base and corn base, you can elect PLC maybe on the wheat base and ARC County on the corn base. You can mix and match those two elections within the base acres on your farm. If you elect ARC IC, it applies to all covered commodities planted on the farm and all base acres on the farm. ARC IC cannot be interchanged with ARC County and PLC on the farm base acres. And one thing that's really important for producers to note is that you are making your program election and your contract enrollment all on the same form. If you previously signed a multi-year contract, there may be no action necessary on your part unless you want to make that election change for 2021. Or if you've had any type of farm record changes from 2020 to 2021, if you've had share changes, added land, ownership changes, operator changes, any type of farm record change, then you're going to want to contact your FSA office to make sure you're timely enrolled and elected. In all cases, regardless if you signed a multi-year contract, if you do not make an election for 2021, then the election in place for 2019 and 2020 will roll forward and be your election for 2021. So what that is saying is if you elected Ark County on your farm for 2019 and 2020, and you do not make a new election for 2021, your election will remain as Ark County on your farm for the 2021 crop season. And then regardless of whether you make a new election or not, a new contract enrollment must be completed by the deadline. It's also important to note that an election decision must be unanimous by all 2021 producers on the farm. And if you're unsure of what needs to be done, I just highly urge you to contact your FSA office before the deadline, and they'll guide you through the process. They'll let you know what you need to do. So this slide is just a list of the 22 covered commodities that are eligible for the ARC and PLC program benefits. The planting of any of these 22 covered commodities would be an eligibility requirement for ARC IC. ARC County or PLC eligibility is not contingent on the planting of any of these commodities. So for an election or an enrollment of ARC County or PLC, a producer's farm is going to have base crop acres of any of the 22 covered commodities. So when we are looking at signature requirements for ARC County or PLC, for enrollment, any producer that shares in the base acres will need to sign the ARC County or PLC contract. But if you're making an election change to ARC County and PLC, then any producer that shares in any of the farm's cropland acres must sign the ARC County or PLC contract. And that would include any producer that's on cropland, grass, or alfalfa. Our exception would be CRP acres. If you're a producer on CRP acres, you would not need to sign, or if you are a producer on non-cropland acres on the farm, you would not need to sign. But FSA is going to first look to the required election signatures, and if no new election is made, then we're going to follow policy for the required enrollment signatures. So when we're looking at an election and enrollment of ARC IC, our signature requirements are different. Any producer planting, and the key word there is planting, any one of the 22 covered commodities must sign the ARC IC contract for election and enrollment in order to be eligible for an ARC IC payment. Failure of even one producer to sign the ARC IC contract is going to prevent all producers on the farm from receiving a payment. So if you are enrolling in ARC IC, you're going to want to be very sure that you're informing FSA of all producers on the farm that's going to be planting any of the 22 covered commodities. And this is going to include anyone that may be planting even 1 acre of a food plot, or say your landowner retains only a small acreage themselves to put a little grain of some sort in. They would also need to sign the ARC IC contract. Producers need to contact their county office soon to request a reconstitution of a farm to correct farm records if they would like specific land split out in order to meet the applicable election and enrollment signature requirements. You're also going to want to notify your county office of any ownership changes, land changes, operator changes that could affect getting the proper signatures for program eligibility by that March 15th deadline. We want to be sure we have the right owners and operators on our farm units, so we're getting the proper signatures when you're doing new elections and enrollments. So now I'm going to just take you through a brief explanation of each program and how it works. And the first one we're going to cover is the Price Loss Coverage Program. And PLC is simply a price protection program. Payments are triggered when the effective price for a crop year is less than the effective reference price. Payments are issued after October 1 of the following crop year. We always make our payments for ARC PLC a year in arrears. And again, PLC can be elected on a crop-by-crop basis. These are the reference prices that were set in the 2018 Farm Bill. Just to highlight a few, corn is $3.70, grain sorghum $3.95, soybeans $8.40, wheat $5.50, sunflowers $20.15 per hundredweight. So these reference prices are the basis for the effective reference price. And the effective reference price is the greater of either the reference price or 85% of the 5-year Olympic average market year average price. Prices can be found on our ARC PLC public program data site, along with yields, benchmarks, and other data needed to help make an election decision. That's a public website where you can get all the information that you need for knowing what benchmarks are, where prices and yields are at for your county. And I guess I'll check and see if there's a way we can provide that URL to everybody. PLC effective price represents the price received for a crop in a specific year. It's compared to the effective reference price to determine if there's a price loss that triggers a PLC payment. So our effective price, again, is the higher of our market year average price or the national loan rate. And the market year average price comes from a national weighted average of all prices received during the marketing year following harvest. And I've been told that that weighted average comes from over 3,000 warehouses across the nation. And I just want to point out here also that the market year average price is utilized in all 3 program options, in PLC, in ARC County, and in ARC Individual for payment calculations. This slide is just a reminder of what our formula is for PLC and what the PLC payment rates were for 2019 for the nation. PLC payment rates, again, are one rate that applies to everybody in the nation. 2019 crop year payments were just made in the fall of 2020. So from this slide, you can see our effective reference price for corn is $3.70. The effective price came in at $3.56. So the difference between those two is our PLC payment rate of 14 cents. For 2019, corn PLC payment rate was 14 cents. Soybeans did not earn a payment under PLC program. Wheat, 92 cents a bushel, and grain sorghum was at 61 cents a bushel. This slide is just a quick reminder of what the farm level payment calculation equation would be. So you can see we would take that PLC payment rate times your farm's PLC yield times the payment acres. Now our payment acres for PLC is going to be the acres for the crop base times 85%. So if you have 100 acres of corn base on your farm and 100 acres of soybean base on your farm, but corn is the only crop that triggers, we're going to take that 100 acres of corn base times 85% and your payment acres then would be 85 acres. And again, I just want to note that PLC payments are not dependent on the planting of the crop, only if that crop triggers for a payment and you have base acres on your farm for that crop. This is just a quick example then of how the actual payment calculation works for PLC. In this example, the farm has corn base acres and a PLC payment triggered for the corn. It doesn't matter, again, if the producer planted corn or not, the farm has corn base acres. So in this calculation, our payment acres are 425 acres of base times 85%, times 165, which is the PLC yield on the farm, times our payment rate of 13 cents, calculated to a payment for this farm for PLC on corn of $7,749. So now let's go into the agricultural risk coverage program. And there are two options for the risk coverage, ARC County or ARC IC. And ARC County is at the county level, and ARC IC would be at the individual level. So ARC County is going to use your county level yields, and ARC IC is going to use the producer's own individual yields. So let's take a look at ARC County first. ARC County is a revenue loss program, and losses are determined for a crop independent of other crops on the farm. Covered crop does not have to be planted on the farm. If revenue loss occurs, payments are issued on 85% of the farm's base acres for the triggered crop, same as our PLC program. And there's no requirement to report production to your local FSA office. For ARC County, the benchmark revenue is determined for a crop by multiplying the 5-year Olympic county average yield by the 5-year Olympic average national price. The 5-year average is based on the 5 years prior to the preceding year of the program year. So for 2020, we would have used 2014 through 2018, and 2019 would be our lag year. And then for 2021, we're going to use 2015 through 2019, with 2020 being our lag year. So you can see it's a rolling 5-year average. County level actual revenue is determined for a crop by multiplying the actual average county yield for the crop by the higher of the market year average or national loan rate. Our ARC County payment is going to trigger on a crop when the actual county revenue falls below the county guarantee, which is 86% of the county benchmark revenue. It's important to remember that an ARC County payment rate is capped at 10% of the benchmark revenue. So this is just a simple ARC County producer payment example. Once the actual average county yield is determined for the crop, along with the market year average price, then the crop revenue can be calculated. If the national loan rate is higher than the market year average price for the crop, then the national loan rate would be used in the calculation. In this example, our actual county yield was 135 for corn. The market year average price is 380, which is higher than the national loan rate of 220, so we would use 380 in our calculation. We'd take the bushels, the yield times the market year average price to get our ARC County actual crop revenue of $513 an acre. So you can see on this slide that there's a crop revenue loss of $18.39. The ARC County guarantee, or the benchmark calculation isn't shown for simplicity of this slide, but the guarantee was calculated at $531.39. The Ark County actual revenue came in at $513. So we have a crop revenue loss of $18.39 an acre for the county. Remember, our guarantee is 80% of the benchmark revenue. So it's showing us on the slide that our benchmark revenue came in at $617.90. And then we have to apply that cap. So at the very bottom of the slide, you can see our cap payment amount would be $61.79. So a quick payment example, this farm has corn base of 100 acres, times our 85% of the base gives us 80 acres of payment base acres, times the producer's share. For this example, the share is 100%, times the crop revenue loss would equal our producer's payment. If the producer in this example only had a 50% share because he cash rents with he share leases with the landowner, the payment reflected here then would need to be divided evenly between the landowner and the tenant. Also, I want to note that producers on the farm could be eligible for an Ark County payment on corn because there was a revenue loss on corn in this county. And this is going to be true regardless of whether or not corn was actually planted on the farm. And I know I've said that more than once, but I just want to reiterate that. So under the 2018 Farm Bill, there were more counties and crops added for separate irrigated and non-irrigated county yields to determine revenues and payment rates for Ark County. HIP counties and crops were determined on a crop-by-crop basis by national office. Counties and crops that do not qualify as HIP use a blended average yield or an all yield for their Ark County calculations. So depending on whether or not your farm has history of irrigated acres, when it comes to an Ark County calculation, you may or may not be using a HIP percentage in the calculation. So a few things that are important that I want to note regarding irrigated and non-irrigated yields for Ark County calculations. A HIP percentage will be determined for the applicable crops on each farm if you are in a HIP-approved county, and that HIP percentage is based on acreage report data from 2013 to 2017. A HIP percentage will be used to determine the number of base acres used in the irrigated revenue calculation, and then a number of base acres to be used in the non-irrigated revenue calculation. And then your HIP percentage is going to remain on your farm through 2023. So if you have irrigated history and you are in a county that is HIP eligible, you could have a calculation for Ark County crops using an irrigated percentage and a non-irrigated percentage. One important thing to note is that irrigated and non-irrigated revenues and guarantees are weighted and summarized to the farm level, which will result in one overall weighted average payment rate for the crop. If you don't have irrigation history on your farm calculations for Ark County, then you will just use an all yield for an Ark County calculation. Another new feature under the 2018 Farm Bill for Ark County is revenues will be calculated based on a farm's physical location, as determined by each tract associated with the farm. So Ark County benchmark revenues, guarantees, and actual revenues are based on the physical location of each tract on the farm, weighted by the base acres associated with the tract, and then summarized to the farm level for one ARC County payment rate for the covered commodity on the farm. So if your farm is being administered out of one county, but you have land in that farm that's physically located in another county, that's where this policy will come into play for physical location. Farms and crops across the county office enrolled in ARC County could have different payment rates calculated for ARC County, depending on the complexity of the farm structure, tract physical location, and base crops. And one thing I just want to note here is because of the complexity that HIP percentages and physical location brings to ARC County, a producer may receive a payment, whereas his neighbor could possibly not receive a payment or even receive a completely different payment rate on the same crop base acres. Our ARC County calculation is not the same across the board anymore like it was under the 2014 Farm Bill because we now have physical location and HIP percentages in play. So now let's go over ARC IC. ARC IC is a whole farm revenue coverage at the producer's individual level, using the producer's own farm level yields for calculation. Revenues are weighted for all planted covered commodities to determine the producer's overall gain and loss. So in order to be eligible for ARC IC, a farm must have at least 1/100th of an acre of a covered commodity actually planted to determine revenue, gains, and losses for that ARC IC crop. The only exception would be is if your farm is 100% approved prevent planting. If a revenue loss occurs, payments are issued on 65% of the farm's total base acres. And that's different than ARC County and PLC, where we take 85% of the base crop acres that trigger. So, for example, if you have a farm that has 100 acres of corn base, 100 acres of soybean base, and 100 acres of wheat base, we're going to look at the total base, which is 300 total base acres on that farm, and times it by 65%. To get your base acres for payment calculation under ARC IC. And then the last bullet there, if you elect ARC IC, producers have to report production to their county FSA office. I just want to point out with the prevent planned acres that if a producer on the farm has all prevent planned acres, but then there's a second producer on the farm that has planted even 1 acre of a covered commodity, the prevent planned acres will not be eligible for a payment. So in a situation like that, only the producer who planted the 1 acre of covered commodity will be eligible for an ARC IC payment calculation. The other producer on the farm that had all PP acres will not be eligible because the farm was not 100% prevent plant. Under the ARC IC program, income support is provided to producers who plant any of the 22 covered commodities. Producers on an ARC IC enrolled farm who do not share in the farm's planted covered commodities are ineligible for ARC IC payments. So if there's producers on the farm who have grass acres or alfalfa acres, they're not eligible for an ARC IC payment. An FSA will compute benchmark revenues for each covered commodity that is planted in the current crop year. So say you have an ARC IC election for 2021 and you plant only corn for 2021, your ARC IC revenues will be calculated on only corn. Only initially planted covered commodities are included in the revenue calculations. We don't include subsequent crops that may have been planted. Again, it's telling us here prevent plant acres are only included in cases where 100% of the farm's planted covered commodities are approved prevent plant. Production must be certified for the current year and the benchmark years. And that production reporting deadline is July 15th in the year following. So for 2020, you would need to report by July 15th of 2021 what your production was for that farm enrolled in ARC-IC. So this slide is just pointing out that when we went into this farm bill, our first year was 2019. And in 2019, we had an exceptionally large amount of prevent plant acres in South Dakota. So a lot of producers did go into the ARC-IC program for 2019, which also carried into 2020. So if you no longer want to be in the ARC-IC program, you're going to want to make sure that you contact your FSA office before the March 15th deadline and get that election change made for 2021. If you don't change that election, then you will have an ARC-IC election for the 2021 production season. ARC-IC yields don't take into consideration irrigated and non-irrigated acres. When you report ARC-IC yields, it's one blended yield at the farm level. ARC-IC yields need to include production from all ARC-IC eligible types of the covered commodity planted. So if you've planted winter wheat and spring wheat, you'll report one overall wheat yield. Production from acres of covered commodities that are hayed and grazed need to have a conversion factor. So if you have acres that have been hayed or grazed and you are unsure of what that conversion factor may be, you can contact your local FSA office and they can give you the conversion factor so that you can convert that into a yield for reporting your ARC-IC yield at the farm level. And then again, payments are just calculated using 65% of the total base acres on the farm. So ARC payments are going to trigger when the current year revenue from all planted covered commodities on the producer's ARC-IC farm falls below the guaranteed revenue for the ARC-IC farm. When we talk about an ARC-IC farm, it's defined as the producer's share of all planted covered commodities from all ARC-IC enrolled farms within the state. And we call that your bucket. So we're going to look at all farms that are enrolled in ARC-IC that you have a share in within the state of South Dakota. And we're going to put all of that into one bucket to calculate a payment for you. Revenue from ARC-IC farms that are not enrolled in the current year is not included. So what that's saying is if you have 4 farms, 3 of them are in ARC-IC and 1 is in ARC County, only the 3 farms that are in ARC-IC will be put into your bucket for a revenue calculation. The farm that's enrolled and elected in ARC County will not be considered for the calculation. And then we don't include crop insurance indemnities in our ARC-IC calculations. The bottom note there is just kind of a statement that could or could not be true. Revenue from one ARC-IC crop could potentially eliminate revenue loss from another ARC-IC farmer crop. So what that's saying is, let's say you have 2 farms in ARC-IC. You have corn planted on both farms. Your first farm yielded well. Your second farm was hailed out. When we put both those farms into your bucket, your first farm that yielded well could potentially offset the revenue loss from your farm that was hailed out. It would all just depend on where the yields end up and where our prices end up for the market year. Each producer will have their own unique benchmark revenue calculated across all planted covered commodities. So if you crop share with a landowner, his bucket calculation will be different than your bucket calculation. A weighted average of the benchmark revenues is guaranteed at 86%, same as Ark County, and an actual revenue is calculated across all planted covered commodities and compared to the guarantee to determine if there's a loss. This next slide is just a very high-level example of how we look at a weighted benchmark. There's only 2 crops on this farm, wheat and barley. Our planted acres, 1,000 acres of wheat, 600 acres of barley. We need to drill down to the percentage of planted covered commodities on the farm. So we add up our planted acres, and then we divide that out. So you can see for wheat, 62.5% of the farm was planted to wheat, and 37.5% was planted to the barley. In the next portion of the slide where it's showing the calculations, the benchmark revenue was calculated ahead of time here for us. So you can see $258.32 times our percentage of planted covered commodity, the 62.5%, gives us a wheat benchmark revenue of $161.45 per acre. And then the same for barley comes to $109.13. We're going to add those 2 up. $270.58 is what our weighted farm benchmark revenue is for this farm. Now remember, our guarantee is 86% of our weighted benchmark. So we have our guarantee calculation there. So our guarantee ends up being $232.70 an acre. This is a calculation of an actual revenue and then our loss calculation. So to get to our actual revenue, we're going to take our producer's certified yield for the crops. And you can see the producer certified to a 35 bushel yield for wheat and a 48 for barley. We're going to use the higher of our market year average price or our loan rate, and in this case, it's showing market year average price, and then our planted acres. And we're going to take our yield times our price times our planted acres to get a revenue for that crop. So you can see for wheat, it's $182,000. For barley, it's $132,480. Our total revenue on the farm is $314,480. To get down to our revenue per acre, we would need to take that divided by our total planted acres. So our revenue per acre is $196.55. That's our actual revenue for the farm. Now we want to compare that to our guarantee to see if we have a loss. And in this case, we do. Our guarantee was $232. Our actual revenue was $196. So our loss is calculated at $36.15 an acre. But remember, our payment is capped at 10% of the benchmark. So our cap of the benchmark is $27.06. So in this calculation here, we would only get to use our 10% cap for our payment rate for our ARC-IC calculation. This slide is just a quick then at the farm level how we would calculate an ARC-IC payment. Again, we're going to look at the total number of base acres on the farm, which is 750 acres, times 65%, gets us 487.5 acres of payment acres, times the producer's share, times our payment rate, which is $27.06. So in this calculation, the ARC IC payment would be $13,192. Something important to note is, again, if an enrolled ARC IC farm is planted entirely to non-covered commodities, then there's going to be no payment issued for the base acres from that farm. If you have a farm that's all alfalfa, there's not a covered commodity to use to figure these calculations for revenue and benchmark. So it would not be eligible for an ARC IC payment. This slide is just a quick recap of the comparison between the three programs, PLC, ARC County, and ARC IC. So this is South Dakota's specific numbers to show you how the base acres were split out during the election period for the 2019-2020 crop seasons. So you can see the different columns, PLC, ARC County, ARC IC. We just looked at three crops, corn, soybeans, and wheat. So corn-based acres, about 47% of corn-based acres went into PLC, 25% into ARC County, and 26% into ARC IC. Soybeans, about 7% went into PLC, 59 into ARC County, 32 into ARC IC. And then wheat, a lot of wheat base acres went into PLC under the 2019 program, and then 11% into ARC County and almost 10% into ARC IC. So as of January 11th of 2021, just last month, this is the estimated total dollars paid out for all three programs, $275 million. And then we have a breakdown here of each program. The estimated PLC, a little over $113 million went out. Estimated ARC County, a little over $81 million. And then estimated ARC IC, almost $81 million paid out under the 2019 farm program. So just a few reminders here before we end. Again, I just want to reiterate, our deadline is March 15th of 2021. That's not very far away, so I highly urge you to contact your FSA office. Our offices can't service everybody on the last day, so the sooner you can get in there, the better. If no new election is made, then you're going to retain your election that you had for 2019 and 2020. And regardless of whether a new election is made for 2021, you could possibly need to re-enroll your contract. Again, if you're unsure, just give your county office a call and they will be able to help you out. Again, I want to remind you, if you've got any farm record changes, you need a reconstitution on your farm, you want land split out of your farm for 2021, please call your FSA office sooner rather than later and get that in the process of happening. Producers, again, you're going to want to contact your office. We need you to get in there before this March 15th deadline. We don't want to see anybody be ineligible for the 2021 program. And when we talk about the March 15th deadline, that is also the required date that your signatures need to be submitted to the county office. So if you don't go to the county office until March 14th, your signatures need to be back by March 15th. And that is the end of the presentation.
Shelley, did you or Teresa, were there any of the questions down towards the bottom of our screen that we're seeing in the Q&A that you felt you wanted to answer for maybe the good of the group for everyone? Otherwise, we can send out those Q&A question and answers later.
Gail, I do see one question here. I will read it and answer it. What if I enroll for corn and want to change to soybeans because of bad weather? Would I be able to do that? Because I will not know that by March 15th. If you remember back in the slides, I commented that Ark County and PLC is not contingent on the planting of any covered commodity. So you can plant whatever you want to, whenever you want to. The elections are made on the base acres that are on your farm. And then for Ark IC, if you go from corn to soybeans, you're still planting a covered commodity, so you would be fine.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. And I think if you scroll down on there, you might be able to see we've got a few more questions on there as well, underneath the first one. Are you able to scroll, or do you want me or Teresa to read those?
What is defined as a producer? Is a landowner a producer? If the land is rented, does the renter have to sign the ARC contract, or can the owner sign the contract? We define a producer on the farm depending on which election you go into. So going back to my one slide where I talked about that, if you're going into Ark County or PLC, the election on the farm needs to be made by any producer that has a share of the cropland acres. Even if it's grass cropland acres, they would be a producer on the farm. If you're electing Ark IC, our producer is anyone on the farm that's going to be planting a covered commodity. If your landowner is a zero-share landowner and they're not planting any covered commodities for Ark IC, or they don't have control of any cropland acres, if you're going into Ark County or PLC, they would not need to sign the contract. Another question under Ark County, is there a requirement that the crop actually be planted? No, there is no requirement that you plant any of the covered commodities for Ark County or PLC. Ark County and PLC payments are based off of the base acres you have on your farm and whether or not those base acre crops trigger a payment. And then the question is for the same under Ark IC. And yes, for Ark IC, there is the requirement. You do have to plant a covered commodity in order to be eligible, but we have the exception of prevent plant acres. Prevent plant acres have to be 100% of the farm with not even 1/100th of an acre of a covered commodity planted. So if your farm has 100 acres of cropland, all 100 acres have to be prevent plant in order for prevent plant to qualify under Ark IC. Is there a website or something where we can look to see what the Olympic averages are for each county? Yes, there is. It's a public website. It's the ARC PLC program data website. Gail, is there a way we can send that link out?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, if you get it to me, I'll include it with the follow-up email to all the participants. Yep, great idea.
Perfect. We will get that link sent out to you. That link will give you everything you need. It will give you prior year yields, benchmarks, prices, loan rates. It will give you everything that you need to try to figure out what election you want to make. If in 2021 I elect to stay with the same election I made in 2019, what is the date by which I have to enroll for 2021? You still need to enroll by March 15th of 2021. You'll want to contact your county office on that one because you could possibly have signed a multi-year contract in 2019 and 2020. And if you signed a multi-year contract, you have no farm record changes and you're not changing your election, then you may not have to do anything by March 15th. But I highly encourage you to contact your FSA office to be sure of that. Can I elect PLC for corn and ARC County for soybeans? Yes, absolutely. You can mix and match PLC and ARC County within the different base acre crops on a farm. What you cannot mix and match is ARC IC. If you elect ARC IC, it's for the whole farm, all base acres. But PLC and ARC County can be mixed and matched within the farm. And I think that was all of the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. It looks like we've gotten through the questions anyways, but again, I thank Shelley for a great presentation and overview of ARC and PLC. Hopefully you folks at least got some questions answered, and if not, feel free to reach out to your local county FSA offices always. We are open for business, but our doors may be locked, but certainly know we're here to help. Give us a call, reach out to them and see what it is that you need to do, and just a reminder of that deadline. So just thanks. Thanks for taking time, everyone, to join in on this webinar. Be watching for that follow-up email from me. It'll come from Gail Gullickson at USDA.gov, so you'll be seeing that coming. So if there's nothing further, we will go ahead and wrap it up, and I just ask everyone to stay safe out there and take care.